Welcome, dear friends, to a captivating tale of family, betrayal, and unexpected second chances. Enjoy the story. The Anderson family was the envy of Maple Grove, a picturesque suburb just outside of Chicago. Their two-story Victorian home, with its perfectly manicured lawn and wraparound porch, stood as a testament to their success. James Anderson, a rising star in the tech industry, had just been promoted to senior software engineer at a prestigious firm. His wife, Sarah, was a freelance writer whose lifestyle blog was gaining traction among suburban moms. But it was their twin boys, Ethan and Ryan, who truly stole the show. At 6 years old, they were the spitting image of cherubs, with golden curls and dimpled cheeks that could melt the coldest of hearts. On this particular Sunday afternoon, the Andersons were hosting their annual summer barbecue. The backyard was filled with the sounds of laughter and the sizzle of burgers on the grill. James, wearing an apron that read, "Kiss the Cook," flipped patties with expert precision. "Honey, can you bring out the potato salad?" he called to Sarah, who was in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on her famous 7-layer dip. "Coming right up," Sarah chirped, her voice sounding just a touch too cheerful. As she carried the bowl outside, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection in the patio doors. Her honey blonde hair was styled in perfect beachy waves, and her sundress hugged her figure in all the right places. But behind her megawatt smile, there was a flicker of something else. Exhaustion, perhaps, or a hint of discontent. "There she is, the domestic goddess herself," James announced, as Sarah emerged onto the patio. Their guests chuckled appreciatively, raising their drinks in a toast. Sarah plastered on her brightest smile, but inside she felt a familiar twinge of annoyance. She loved her family, she truly did, but sometimes the pressure to maintain this facade of perfection was suffocating. As the party wore on, Sarah found herself gravitating towards the edge of the yard, where her best friend Lisa was sipping a glass of white wine. "How do you do it, Sarah?" Lisa asked, her eyes wide with admiration. "The perfect house, the perfect kids, the perfect husband. It's like you've got it all figured out." Sarah laughed, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Oh, it's not all sunshine and roses. We have our moments." Just then, a shrill voice cut through the pleasant chatter of the party. "James, darling! There you are!" Sarah's shoulders tensed as she turned to see her mother-in-law, Linda Anderson, making her way across the lawn. Linda was impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit that probably cost more than Sarah's entire wardrobe. "Mom!" James exclaimed, setting down his spatula to embrace his mother. "I didn't think you'd make it." Linda air-kissed both of James's cheeks before turning her critical gaze on Sarah. "Sarah, dear, you look comfortable," she said, her tone dripping with barely concealed disdain. Sarah forced herself to smile. "It's so nice to see you, Linda. Can I get you a drink?" "Oh, no thank you," Linda replied. "I can't stay long. I just wanted to drop off these brochures." She pulled out a stack of glossy pamphlets from her designer handbag. "I've been researching some excellent private schools for the boys. After all, it's never too early to start planning for their future." Sarah's smile faltered. "That's thoughtful of you, Linda, but James and I are really happy with the public school system here." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Well, I suppose that's fine if you're content with mediocrity, but my grandsons deserve the very best." Before Sarah could respond, James intervened. "Mom, why don't we talk about this later? Today's about having fun and relaxing." Linda sniffed but allowed herself to be led away, leaving Sarah standing alone, her fists clenched at her sides. As she watched her mother-in-law fawning over the twins, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. Linda had always been critical of her, but lately, it seemed like the woman was on a mission to undermine every aspect of Sarah's life. Little did Sarah know, this was just the beginning of a storm that would soon tear her picture-perfect world apart. The weeks following the barbecue were tense in the Anderson household. Linda's visits became more frequent, and with each one, Sarah felt her patience wearing thinner. One Wednesday afternoon, Sarah was in the middle of writing a blog post when Linda breezed into the house unannounced. "Hello? Anyone home?" Linda's voice echoed through the foyer. Sarah sighed, saving her work before heading downstairs. "Linda, what a surprise," she said, trying to keep the irritation out of her voice. Linda was already in the living room, running a finger along the mantel and tisking at the imaginary dust she found there. "Sarah, dear, don't you think it's time you got a real job? I mean, this little writing hobby of yours is cute, but surely you want to contribute more to the family finances." Sarah felt her cheeks flush with anger. "My little hobby pays for the boys' extracurricular activities and our family vacations," she said, her voice tight. Linda waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please, we both know James is the real breadwinner here. You should be focusing on keeping the house in order and raising my grandsons properly." Something inside Sarah snapped. Years of pent-up frustration came pouring out. "Now you listen here, Linda," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "I have put up with your criticism and your snide comments for years, but I've had enough. This is my home, my family, and my life. You don't get to waltz in here and tell me how to live it." Linda's eyes widened in shock. For a moment she was speechless. Then her face contorted with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that, after everything I've done for this family?" "What you've done?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "You mean constantly undermining me, criticizing my parenting, and trying to turn James against me? Yeah, thanks so much for that." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted their heated exchange. James was home. Linda's demeanor changed instantly. Tears welled up in her eyes as she rushed to meet her son at the door. "Oh, James!" she cried. "You won't believe how your wife just spoke to me." James looked between his mother and Sarah, confusion evident on his face. "What's going on here?" Sarah opened her mouth to explain, but Linda beat her to it. "She's become so ungrateful, James, after everything we've done for her. I was just trying to offer some helpful suggestions, and she flew off the handle." "That's not what happened at all," Sarah protested, but James was already comforting his mother. "Mom, I'm sure Sarah didn't mean to upset you," he said soothingly. "Why don't you go lie down in the guest room for a bit? I'll talk to Sarah." As Linda made her way upstairs, shooting a triumphant glance at Sarah, James turned to his wife with a frown. "Sarah, what were you thinking? You know how sensitive Mom is?" Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Are you kidding me? James, your mother has been belittling me for years, and you've never once stood up for me." James ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "Come on, that's not fair. Mom means well. She just wants what's best for us." "No, James. She wants what's best for you. She's never accepted me as part of this family." The conversation went in circles, with James refusing to see Linda's behavior for what it was. By the time they went to bed that night, a cold silence had settled between them. As Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in her marriage. The cracks in their perfect facade were beginning to show, and she feared it was only a matter of time before everything came crumbling down. In the days following Sarah's confrontation with Linda, James found himself increasingly torn between his wife and his mother. Linda's words echoed in his mind, planting seeds of doubt about his relationship with Sarah. "She's got you wrapped around her little finger, James," Linda had said during one of their private conversations. "A real man wouldn't let his wife make all the decisions." James had bristled at first, defending Sarah and their partnership, but as he began to pay more attention, he started to notice things he'd overlooked before. The way Sarah chose his clothes for important meetings, how she planned their vacations, even how she subtly guided his interactions with the twins. Had he really become so passive in his own life? One evening, as James was leaving work, his colleague Mike invited him out for drinks. "Sorry, can't tonight," James said automatically. "Sarah's got dinner planned, and we're supposed to go over the boys' school schedules." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Geez, Anderson, when did you become such a henpecked husband?" The word hit James like a slap in the face. Henpecked. Is that how others saw him? "You know what? Dinner can wait," James said, forcing a grin. "Let's grab that drink." One drink turned into several, and as the night wore on, James found himself opening up to Mike about his frustrations. "It's like I'm not even in control of my own life anymore," he slurred, nursing his fourth whiskey. "Everything's about what Sarah wants, what Sarah thinks is best." Mike nodded sympathetically. "Women, man, they'll take everything if you let 'em. You gotta show 'em who's boss sometimes, you know?" James's alcohol-addled brain latched onto this idea. Yes, he needed to assert himself, to prove he was still a man in charge of his own destiny. As he stumbled out of the bar, James's eyes landed on an attractive young woman waiting for a taxi. Without thinking, he approached her, turning on the charm that had laid dormant for so long. "Can I help you with that cab?" he asked, flashing what he hoped was a debonair smile. The woman looked him up and down, a small smirk playing on her lips. "Thanks, but I think I can manage on my own." James felt a flush of embarrassment, quickly followed by anger. Who did she think she was, rejecting him like that? Didn't she know who he was? As he finally made his way home, much later than he'd intended, James's mind was a whirlwind of confused emotions. He felt ashamed of his behavior at the bar, but also resentful towards Sarah for what exactly? Being a good wife? Making their life run smoothly? Sarah was waiting up for him, worry etched on her face. "James, where have you been? I was so worried." Instead of feeling touched by her concern, James felt a surge of irrational anger. "I'm a grown man, Sarah. I don't need to report my every move to you." Hurt flashed across Sarah's face, quickly replaced by confusion. "I never said you did. I was just concerned because this isn't like you." "Well, maybe it's time for a change," James snapped, stumbling towards the stairs. "Maybe it's time I started doing what I want for a change." As he collapsed into bed, still fully clothed, James couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of a precipice. Part of him knew he was being unfair to Sarah, that his mother's words and his own insecurities were poisoning his mind. But another part, a darker part, whispered that maybe this was exactly what he needed to break free, to prove his manhood. Little did he know, his actions in the coming days would set in motion a chain of events that would destroy the very family he claimed to be protecting. The tension in the Anderson household had reached a boiling point. James's late nights at the office became more frequent, and when he was home, he was distant and irritable. Sarah tried to bridge the growing gap between them, but her efforts were met with cold indifference. One sunny Saturday, Sarah suggested a family outing to the local boulevard, hoping some fresh air and quality time might help mend their fractured relationship. "Come on, it'll be fun," she coaxed, as James scrolled through his phone, barely acknowledging her. "The boys have been cooped up all week, and the weather's perfect." James grunted noncommittally, but eventually agreed. As they strolled along the tree-lined path, pushing the twins in their stroller, they almost looked like the perfect family they once were, but the strained silence between them told a different story. Halfway through their walk, Sarah felt a sharp pain in her side. She winced, placing a hand on her lower back. "You okay?" James asked, his tone more annoyed than concerned. "I'm fine," Sarah lied, not wanting to give him another reason to be frustrated with her. Just a little twinge. But as they continued walking, the pain intensified. Sarah's steps slowed, and she found herself breaking out in a cold sweat. "James," she gasped, doubling over. I think something's really wrong." James looked at her, alarm finally breaking through his aloof facade. "What is it? What's wrong?" "I don't know," Sarah panted, the pain now radiating through her entire abdomen. It hurts so bad." Panic set in, as James realized the severity of the situation. He flagged down a passing jogger, asking them to call an ambulance while he tried to comfort Sarah, who was now curled up on a nearby bench, whimpering in pain. The ambulance arrived within minutes, its sirens cutting through the peaceful afternoon. As the paramedics loaded Sarah into the back, James stood frozen, the twins crying in their stroller. "Sir," one of the paramedics called, snapping James out of his daze. "Are you riding with us or following in your own vehicle?" James looked from Sarah to the twins, indecision written across his face. I can't leave the boys," he stammered. Sarah's eyes met his, filled with pain and something else. Disappointment? Fear? Before he could decipher it, the ambulance doors closed, and they sped away, leaving James standing alone with his crying children. As he mechanically pushed the stroller home, James's mind raced. What was happening to Sarah? Was it serious? And why, when she needed him most, had he hesitated to be by her side? By the time he got the boys settled and arranged for a neighbor to watch them, Hours had passed. When James finally arrived at the hospital, he was met with news that sent his world spinning. "Mr. Anderson?" A tired-looking doctor approached him. "Your wife is out of surgery. We had to perform an emergency procedure to remove kidney stones that had caused a severe infection." James felt the blood drain from his face. "Surgery? But she was fine this morning." The doctor's expression was grave. "Mr. Anderson, kidney stones don't develop overnight. Your wife must have been in pain for some time. Didn't you notice anything?" The question hit James like a physical blow. No, he hadn't noticed. He'd been so wrapped up in his own petty grievances, his imagined slights, that he'd completely failed to see his wife's suffering. As he sank into a chair in the waiting room, James's phone buzzed. It was his mother. "James, darling, where are you? I stopped by the house and only the neighbor was there with the boys." James hesitated, then made a decision that would alter the course of their lives forever. "Mom," he said, his voice hollow, "I need your advice. Sarah's in the hospital and I don't know what to do." Linda's voice turned sickeningly sweet. "Oh, my poor boy. Don't worry, Mommy's here. I'll tell you exactly what you need to do." As James listened to his mother's poisonous words, a part of him knew he was making a terrible mistake. But it was easier, so much easier, to let someone else make the hard decisions, to absolve himself of responsibility. Little did he know, the choice he was about to make would shatter his family beyond repair, leaving wounds that might never heal. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room swimming in her vision. Through the haze of pain medication, she became aware of a presence beside her bed. Blinking slowly, she focused on the figure. James. For a moment, relief washed over her. He was here. Despite everything, he had come. But as her vision cleared, she saw the expression on his face, not one of concern or love, but of cold determination. "James?" she croaked, her throat dry and scratchy. "What's going on?" He didn't meet her eyes as he pulled out a stack of papers from his briefcase. "Sarah, we need to talk." Sarah's heart sank as she recognized the official letterhead on the documents. "James," she whispered, her voice trembling, "are those divorce papers?" James nodded stiffly, still avoiding her gaze. "I think it's for the best, Sarah. This isn't working anymore." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, a mixture of pain, confusion, and betrayal. "How can you do this? Now of all times. I'm lying in a hospital bed, for God's sake." "I'm sorry," James said, but his voice held no real emotion. "I've given this a lot of thought. It's better for everyone if we end things now, before it gets even more complicated." Sarah struggled to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her abdomen. "Better for everyone? Or better for you, James? What about the boys? What about our family?" For a moment, something like doubt flickered across James's face, but then his expression hardened. "I've already spoken to my lawyer. We're prepared to offer you a generous settlement. There's a house in the countryside. It'll be a fresh start for you and the boys." Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. This couldn't be real. It had to be a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by the pain medication. But as James continued to drone on about asset division and custody arrangements, the horrifying reality began to sink in. "Your mother put you up to this, didn't she?" Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. James flinched, confirming her suspicions. "Mom has nothing to do with this. It's my decision." "Oh, James," Sarah sighed, a mixture of pity and disgust in her voice. "You never could stand up to her, could you? Even when it meant destroying your own family." Anger flashed in James's eyes. "Don't bring my mother into this. She only wants what's best for me, for us." Sarah laughed bitterly, ignoring the pain it caused. "What's best for us? James, open your eyes. She's been trying to drive us apart since the day we got married, and now she's finally succeeded." James stood abruptly, gathering the papers. "I'll give you some time to think it over. But Sarah, this is happening, one way or another." As he turned to leave, Sarah called out, her voice stronger now, fueled by a growing anger. "You know what, James? Go ahead, leave. But remember this moment. Remember that you chose to abandon your wife when she needed you most. I hope your mother's approval is worth it. The door closed behind James with a soft click, leaving Sarah alone in the sterile hospital room. She stared at the ceiling, tears streaming down her face, wondering how her life had fallen apart so quickly. Little did she know, fate had a surprising twist in store, one that would change everything. Weeks passed, and Sarah found herself in a daze of legal meetings, therapy sessions, and tearful conversations with the twins. The divorce proceedings moved forward with a cold efficiency that left her reeling. One particularly difficult afternoon, after a grueling meeting with her lawyer, Sarah trudged up the front steps of her soon-to-be ex-home. As she sorted through the mail, a thick envelope caught her eye. The return address was from Bulgaria, a country she had no connection to. Curiosity piqued, she tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten in an elegant old-fashioned script. My dearest Sarah, you may not know me, but I am your great-uncle, Adrian Foley. I've spent years trying to track down my brother's descendants, and finally, I've found you. I know this letter comes out of the blue, but I have a proposition for you. I own a successful hotel in Varna, Bulgaria, and as I have no children of my own, I'm looking for an heir to take over the business. I understand you're going through a difficult time. Perhaps a fresh start in a new country could be just what you and your boys need. If you're interested, there's a place for you here, a home, a job, and a future. Please consider my offer. I look forward to hearing from you. Your loving uncle, Adrian. Sarah read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking. It seemed too good to be true, a fairy tale rescue in her darkest hour. But as she researched Adrian Foley and his hotel, everything checked out. For the first time in months, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. This could be her chance to start over, to build a new life for herself and her boys far away from the pain and betrayal they'd experienced. But first, she had to navigate the treacherous waters of her divorce, and James, it seemed, wasn't going to make it easy. The courtroom was tense as Sarah and James faced each other across the polished wooden tables. James's mother, Linda, sat behind him, a smug smile playing on her lips. James's lawyer stood, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, my client is prepared to offer a generous settlement, a house in the countryside, perfect for Mrs. Anderson and the children to start their new life. Sarah's lawyer countered. Your Honor, my client has concerns about the proposed property. It's isolated, with no nearby schools or amenities. We believe it's an attempt to marginalize Mrs. Anderson and limit her opportunities. The judge turned to Sarah. Mrs. Anderson, what are your thoughts on this arrangement? Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to do. Your Honor, I have an alternative proposal. I'd like to relocate with my children to Bulgaria. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. James half rose from his seat, his face a mask of shock and anger. Bulgaria? What the hell are you talking about, Sarah? Sarah's lawyer quickly intervened, presenting the judge with documents proving Adrian's offer and the legitimacy of the hotel business. Your Honor, Sarah said, her voice steady, I've been offered an opportunity to start a new life, to provide for my children in ways I never could hear. All I ask is that the court grant me permission to relocate with Ethan and Ryan. James sputtered, looking frantically between Sarah, the judge, and his mother. Linda's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is preposterous! Linda shrieked, forgetting herself. She can't take my grandbabies to some foreign country. Mrs. Anderson Sr., the judge warned, please control yourself or you'll be removed from the courtroom. James's lawyer scrambled to regroup. Your Honor, we vehemently oppose this relocation. It would severely impact my client's relationship with his children. Sarah's lawyer was ready. Your Honor, given Mr. Anderson's recent behavior, including serving divorce papers to my client while she was hospitalized, we believe his concern for his children's well-being is questionable at best. The arguments went back and forth, but in the end, the judge ruled in Sarah's favor. She was granted primary custody and permission to relocate, with James given generous visitation rights and required to pay child support. As the gavel fell, sealing the decision, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She turned to James, who sat slumped in his chair, looking shell-shocked. "I never wanted it to end this way, James," she said softly, "but you gave me no choice. I hope someday you'll understand that this is best for everyone." With that, Sarah walked out of the courtroom, head held high, ready to embark on her new adventure. Behind her, she could hear Linda's shrill voice berating James, but for once the sound didn't bother her. She was free. 1 year later. The sun was setting over the Black Sea, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Sarah stood on the balcony of the Grand Hotel Varna, watching as guests lounged by the pool and strolled along the beach. "Mama! Mama!" Ethan and Ryan's voices echoed from inside. "Uncle Adrian says it's time for dinner." Sarah smiled, turning to see her great-uncle Adrian wheeling himself onto the balcony. At 75, he was still sharp as a tack, but his health was declining. She was grateful for every moment they had together. "Well, my dear," Adrian said, his eyes twinkling, "shall we feed those ravenous boys of yours?" As they made their way to the hotel's restaurant, Sarah marveled at how much her life had changed in just 1 year. The pain of her divorce was still there, a dull ache that flared up occasionally. But it was overshadowed by the joy and purpose she'd found in her new life. She was learning the hotel business from Adrian, preparing to take over when he could no longer manage it. The boys were thriving in their international school, picking up Bulgarian with an ease that amazed her. And Sarah herself? She was healing, growing stronger every day. She'd even started dating again, a kind local doctor who understood the complexities of her past. As they sat down to dinner, Sarah looked around at her new family. Adrian, the boys, and the hotel staff, who had become like a second family to them all. She thought about James, back in Chicago, who now flew out every other month to see the twins. Their relationship was still strained, but they were learning to co-parent from a distance. "A toast," Adrian announced, raising his glass, "to new beginnings and to the family we choose." Sarah raised her glass, feeling a surge of gratitude. Life hadn't turned out the way she'd planned, but maybe, just maybe, it had turned out even better. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the sea, Sarah knew in her heart that this was exactly where she was meant to be,